This is Science Friday, and I'm Umair Irfan. And it's time for our charismatic creature carnival. Joining me today is Sci-Fi's charismatic creature correspondent, Kathleen Davis. Hi, Kathleen.
Hey, Umair, I'm glad to have you along for the carnival.
Well, I'm really excited to be here. So before we jump into this week's charismatic creatures, remind us what this carnival is all about.
So our charismatic creature carnival is a celebration of 6 creatures suggested by our listeners. By charismatic, we mean a creature that's overlooked or unfairly maligned by the general public that once you look a little bit closer, you can tell it has an undeniable charm. We've got 3 weeks of matchups, and then we're going to crown a winner.
And I hear we have an update about last week's matchup.
Yes. So if you remember, last week we kicked off the carnival with a showdown between the mantis shrimp and the hellbender salamander. Our listeners went to sciencefriday.com/carnival to choose their favorite creature out of the 2, and the votes are in. So Umair, I would like a drum roll, please. Slithering into the first semifinalist spot of this charismatic creature carnival, the people's choice is the mantis shrimp.
Congratulations to all the mantis shrimp enthusiasts out there.
So we still have 2 more semifinalists to discover, one of which is going to come from today's matchup.
All right, I'm ready. So who are our charismatic creatures today?
So our first creature, joining us exclusively from your local woods or maybe even your backyard, is the opossum. This creature was nominated by a couple of people, including listener Anna from Boston, who wrote us on Twitter. She said, "I'd like to nominate the opossum for the carnival because it's the only marsupial in the US and it's pretty cute, even though a lot of people don't like them." And representing the opossum in our showdown this week is Dr. Lisa Walsh, postdoctoral researcher at the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center. She is based in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
And facing off against the opossum in our showdown is the most suggested creature of our carnival. All the way from the forests of Madagascar is the aye-aye. We got quite a few nominations for the aye-aye, including this message on our Sci-Fi Vox Pop app from Lon in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Hi, this is Lon Fields, and I think that you should add the aye-aye as a charismatic creature. They are the largest nocturnal primate. They have some very specialized hands, the way that they search for food. Their teeth never stop growing like a rodent, and just their cute and cuddly looks, all in the eyes of a beholder. Thanks.
And representing the aye-aye in our carnival is Megan McGrath, Education Programs Manager at the Duke Leamer Center in Durham, North Carolina. Welcome and thanks for joining us.
I am excited to be here.
We're excited to have you both here. Just to note that this segment was recorded in front of a live Zoom audience. Learn how you can join a future radio recording at sciencefriday.com/livestream.
So I have to say, I am completely charmed that both of our nominators use the word cute to describe each of these creatures, but I would love a basic description from each of you, just to paint a picture for our audience of what your creature looks like. What are they all about? Lisa, I think more people might be familiar with the opossum, so let's start with you.
Sure. The opossum, and I'm going to preface this with the Virginia opossum, I'm guessing, is what was nominated. So that's the marsupial that is in the US. There are actually over 100 opossum species across the American continents, but just to be brief, I'm going to focus on the Virginia opossum. It's actually the largest of the American opossums, about the size of a cat, usually whitish gray, pink nose, big bluish black ears, and a tail that, unless you're really up close and personal, it looks hairless. There is actually hair there, but because they use it to grab onto branches and stuff, they don't want it to be long and lush, just like our hands, which grab things. We don't have a lot of hair on our hands, so it sometimes gets compared to a rat. I don't think that that is fair to the possum, or a lot of rats out there, actually. The opossum is found from Costa Rica all the way up into Ontario, North Dakota, Maine. They typically are found in deciduous forests. They really like marshland, but they are really resilient animals. They'll be in disturbed environments, including your backyard. I've seen pictures of them on college campuses. They're also found across agriculture fields. They really just don't want to be in desert areas or really high up mountains, but otherwise they're going to be found all over in the temperate America.
Lisa, I wanted to ask, I've heard the term opossum and possum, and they're often used interchangeably. What's the difference?
That's a really good question. So historians tend to credit the name with John Smith, actually, kind of anglicizing an American Indian Algonquin word, opossum, for the animal, which roughly translates to white animal. This was actually the first marsupial that European colonizers discovered. And so that was kind of what they based all other marsupials off of. And so when James Cook arrived in Australia and they found similar looking marsupials that were also in trees, they decided, oh, we should name it opossum, like that original marsupial that we, quote, discovered. And I guess somewhere along the line, they decided, just for clarity, we should call it possum. Although nowadays, even in America, we really, I don't know if it's lazy or we just don't like the O. We also drop the O and sometimes refer to them as possum. But possums in Australasia, those are very distantly related to the opossums we find here. They come from numerous families. The brush-tailed possum, ring-tailed possum, honey possum, but no, those are distinct and their own really interesting, charismatic animals.
Now, let's move on to the eye. Megan, what does this creature look like?
It's one of my favorite things about them because they look like a mash of a bunch of different animals got jumbled together. So we've heard comparisons to possums or opossums before. They have big bushy tails that almost look like a wolf or something. They have giant ears like a bat. But overall, they are about 5 pounds, lots of bushy black and silver wiry hair all over. And they have, in my opinion, extremely charismatic faces with very kind of light silvery hair around their faces, giant eyes, giant ears, and little pink noses.
Now, Megan, I just looked up a picture of an eye, and the thing that jumped out to me is that really long finger they have. What's the point of that?
Great question. So eyes are full of really unusual adaptations, and not just for being their own animal, but they don't match a lot of primate rules, even though they're a primate. They don't match a lot of lemur rules, even though they're a lemur. So they're kind of like the rebels of lemur evolution. And they branched off super early to have all these interesting things. And the finger is one of the most interesting. So all of the eye's fingers are pretty long. That middle tapping finger is actually not their longest finger. It's an optical illusion because it's so thin and skinny and they hold it at a weird angle. And that tapping finger is basically used for everything. We've seen them drink water with it. They'll eat like slices of orange with it. We've even seen one particularly funny eye here who eats his grapes that way, although most of them aren't that fussy. Most of them will just pop a grape in their mouth. So that tapping finger is elongated, very thin. And some people say it's on a ball and socket joint, but technically it is on a very, very flexible joint that basically doesn't keep the tendon going in one direction like ours does. So it can bend sideways either way, and it can also bend backwards. And that finger is ideal if you like to eat bugs and grubs out of trees. So they will chew in with the beaver-like teeth that the person who nominated them mentioned, and then they will get inside of wood and scoop out whatever grub or bug they want to eat with that amazing tapping finger.
So speaking of delicious meals that a creature might eat, I feel like going back to the opossums, a lot of people may associate opossums with trash, for lack of a better term, because they're scavengers, right? I mean, what is the life of an opossum like?
They are scavengers, but they're also predators. They're also foragers. I call them the generalist of generalists. So you'll get mammal species where, across the species, sure, they eat a lot of different things, but individuals will specialize or they'll find one particular thing they want to eat. You look at just one opossum's stomach contents. So that's really showing what they ate in a day or two. It's just an entire evolutionary tree. Birds, plants, slugs, mice, grasshoppers, you name it, they've probably eaten it. I think they get the bad rap that they're associated with trash because they're in our environment. And, they have really delicate noses, they can pick up everything. And if you throw out some tasty food, they will be there, but that's not going to be the only thing they're eating. And I also have a hypothesis that I haven't been able to test. I think they're also using the trash cans as dens. I think they get a bad rap because occasionally they're in a trash can, they get that picture taken and it becomes a meme, and it just is all downhill from there for possums.
We actually have a really good follow-up question that I think is related to that from Vincent from Kansas City. Go ahead, Vincent.
Well, I was wondering if opossums have dens to raise their young, or do they always just carry the joeys with them?
That's a great question, Vincent. They do have dens. They are fairly nomadic animals though, and they can have up to 20 dens that they will cycle through. If there's not a lot of food in the area, they will cycle through a larger, we call it home range. But yes, the females actually, when they're raising their young, they are more likely to stay in a den for longer. They can't dig though, so they're gonna have to find what they can as a den. So this could be a hollowed out tree, this could be a vacant squirrel nest. Sometimes they actually share dens with other mammals, but sometimes it's your attic or your porch. They're just really trying to find somewhere to cozy up during the daytime.
Megan, I saw you raise your hand there. Did you want to weigh in on the diet aspect?
Yeah, so there's a lot of comparisons across these two mammals that are really great. And one is the preference for dens. So aye-ayes also prefer dens. They have been known to use multiple different dens, go months without using a den, go back to it, even use the same den as other aye-ayes. They also don't dig since they're up in the trees. So they'll weave these incredibly intricate nests made out of different branches and natural materials that they find around. And they'll spend hours kind of weaving together those nests and putting them together. But just interesting to compare the fact that just like opossums, they will use different dens, maybe share them with other animals too.
Now, Megan, I feel like one of the things that might convince people that the opossum is charismatic is when you see those photos of the babies hanging off of the bodies there. Exactly. The babies are pretty cute, but I mean, aye-ayes are so funky looking. What is their family structure like? Is that something that might be a charismatic point?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would challenge folks to look up pictures of baby aye-ayes, particularly those that have lived here at the Duke Lemur Center. We've had some very good looking babies in recent years. But I will admit, sometimes they look a little funky. I would argue that a lot of primate babies look funky. No offense to anyone out there. So with baby care, aye-ayes are primates. So by nature, they're going to have a really strong relationship with their baby. They tend to have one infant at a time, maybe twins, but that's more rare. And they will spend years teaching that baby. Primates like aye-ayes and humans are born with notoriously few instincts. We need to learn a lot from our parents in order to survive. And so mom spends a lot of time with them. My favorite thing that baby aye-ayes do, besides all the other normal cute stuff of playing with mom and surprising her, is when they're learning what they can eat and what they can't eat, they will literally just walk up to their mom and grab the food out of her mouth and learn, oh, that's something that I eat, by just stealing it out of mom's mouth.
Lisa, I had another diet question about opossums. I heard that they eat lots of ticks and they perform a valuable pest control function. Is that true?
Well, because this is, I'm trying to champion my animal. Yes, they do help control pests. So because they eat everything, if they stumble into your garden, they're going to eat the slugs that you really don't want, let's say on your tomato plants. They'll eat the snails. They will eat ticks that are on them. Although the study that came out that estimated opossums could be eating up to 5,000 ticks a week, that was with captive opossums. And there really isn't much evidence that they have that strong of a preference or eat that many ticks in the wild. So it's kind of the captive possums did one thing, wild possums seem to be doing another, but we really need a future scientist to investigate this really closely. And so anyone out there who's interested in ticks and possums, the door's wide open for you.
So going back to the ii, I feel like an elephant in the room here is that, I mean, iis really look unlike anything I've ever seen before. Some people, not me, but some people may say that they look a little creepy. And that I hear is the source of some myths in their native ranges. Is that right?
Yes, it can be. So it's interesting. Our recent understanding of the Malagasy people, so that's the people who live in Madagascar, and their view of aye-ayes and other lemurs is evolving as we learn more about how diverse those people are. So for a little background, Madagascar is home to over 27 million people. So that's a lot of people to summarize beliefs on animals. Just like we're talking today, and I think those of us involved in this are big fans of the opossum that, lives in our backyard, but not everybody would be. So we all have different views. So do the people of Madagascar. And a recent study that came out with a Malagasy scientist and a German scientist actually found that even two villages that are within a day's walk of each other might have vastly different views on the aye-aye. So in one village, they might find people who see them as an evil omen. There are even some held beliefs still to this day that aye-ayes, if they're seen, they will bring evil, might even involve killing the aye-aye to protect their village. But on the other side, less than a day's walk away, they found people who actually saw the aye-ayes as a form of pest control because they were growing things like sugar cane, and aye-ayes like to eat the grubs and bugs that infest their plants. And so it really varied, but the overall trend was not surprising, just like everywhere else in the world. The more ecological knowledge and biological knowledge came in, the lower the rate of the superstitions and the cultural taboos against the animal. But I would just caution everyone not to think that everyone in Madagascar has the same view, just like everyone in the US doesn't either.
Staying on this morbid theme for a moment, I know that opossums have a flair for the dramatic, particularly playing dead. Why do they do that? How does it work?
I love my dramatic study species. We are not entirely sure why. It's involuntary. People equate it to a human fainting, right? I don't know if you've ever fainted. If you've fainted in public, it's really not fun. I speak from experience. So it's not something you want to do. But it's essentially fainting out of fear. And for possums, it seems to really happen with touch. So if a dog is running at them, as soon as the dog actually reaches them, that's when they keel over, they're on their side, mouth is hanging open, like the biggest smile, except it doesn't actually look like a smile. It's salivating. When that happens, the eyes stay open, it defecates, it releases this foul green liquid from its anal glands. So it's doing everything possible to not be eaten. Studies show that their heart rate and their brain activity isn't actually changing. So again, similar to fainting, but it can take them a few minutes up to an hour to recover. And I think the issue is if you're like, oh no, I'm so sorry, possum, when you are going after your dog who just chased after this possum, as you touch it, then it just kind of prolongs their feigning death moment. But yeah,
What an argument for the charismatic possum, but it's an important thing to mention.
Yeah.
Just a quick note that I'm Kathleen Davis, and this is Science Friday from WNYC Studios. We have just about reached the end of our time here, but I need to ask both of you to give me your best final arguments for your creatures. Why does your creature deserve to be crowned the most charismatic of this matchup? Megan, why don't you go first with the II?
All right, I will. So I want to start by saying I'm so glad both of these creatures are being featured, but obviously I'm team II. I think what edges them into the top for me is that they're just so incredibly unique. They don't fit into the same mold as other primates. They don't fit into the same mold as other lemurs. They have all these incredibly unique things about them, and they're solitary and really hard to find in the wild. So there's still so much more that we can learn about them that we don't even know yet. And so I would argue that all of those factors together just make them kind of a modern day mystery that makes them fascinating and worthy of the title.
And actually, I spoke too soon. We have one more listener question that we want to get to. Patrick has a question about opossum looks.
Hi there. I was curious, why do possums always have such an unkempt, greasy look to them? And does it offer some sort of ecological advantage to them? Versus our friends, the II, team II, looks a little bit cleaner. So do they groom themselves to be able to keep their coat looking like that?
I guess I don't think most possums are greasy, so I don't know what possums you're seeing. When they are healthy, they are almost constantly grooming, especially the females will be grooming their pouches if they have young in it. There is a natural grease, like most mammals, on fur to help keep the fur fluffed and to prevent things from getting in on the skin. Maybe you're seeing pictures of some of the older possums. So on average, they only live about 1.5 years. So by 2, they're old. And so it might be you're seeing pictures of the old crusty guys who have just given up on grooming.
And Megan, do you have information about the II grooming regimen?
Yeah, absolutely. So it involves more really unique adaptations. So those of you who are lemur fans might know that lemurs are known for having a tooth comb. So that's already unique. It's basically exactly what it sounds like, a comb that grows out of the front of their mouths, just made out of their own teeth. IIs don't have that because they need those beaver-like teeth for chewing through wood. And so instead they have grooming claws that they will use. So they will basically use the claws on the end of those long kind of vampiric kind of looking fingers to groom and get around to all the places they can't reach. And they'll even use that tapping finger, that's their middle finger, to get in their ears and other areas, which results in some really funny moments with the babies when mom's trying to like pick her ears out and the baby's like, Mom, I want to go play.
Okay, going back to our final arguments, I did want to follow up, Megan, on your final argument for the II. And I think you need to disclose something that you told me in an earlier conversation. Something about maybe you're not quite so strongly team II after all.
Well, I think this actually strengthens my argument. So what I disclosed earlier on is that this is a particularly difficult matchup for me because I have 2 tattoos, one inspired by an II and one inspired by the opossum. So I think that makes me even better qualified to say that I love both. I'm so happy the opossum is getting more information out there, but I think I'm still firmly team II for the top of this matchup.
All right, Lisa, it's your turn now. What is your closing argument for the opossum?
There are over 100 opossum species in the Americas, but we just have one that made it all the way up into temperate North America and is putting up with New England style winters. And so this is a really unique species. They are very hardy and they will lose up to 40% of their body weight over the winter just because it's too cold for them to go out and forage. They are also resistant to rattlesnake venom. And we recently discovered that if you shine a light on possums, they will glow, UV light on possums, they will glow pink. In terms of charismatic mammals, marsupials are largely understudied. There's evidence that the pouches of marsupials have antimicrobial properties. The Tasmanian devil's milk kills MRSA. So I don't have the data on opossums and their pouches, largely because especially American marsupials are just so understudied and up until recently have been largely maligned. There was a New Year's Eve possum drop in North Carolina up until 2019, I think. So they get really bad raps for just kind of looking different and being different as the only marsupial in the US.
Okay, Umair, we're out of time. Do you think that we've heard enough for our listeners to choose their favorite charismatic creature of the day?
I think we got pretty comprehensive arguments, and I think listeners have a pretty difficult choice ahead of them. Where can they vote?
So listeners can go to sciencefriday.com/carnival to cast their vote for which creature they think is the most charismatic.
That's sciencefriday.com/carnival.
Yep. And I would love to thank our guests for today, Dr. Lisa Walsh, postdoctoral researcher at the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center. She is based in Washington, D.C., and Megan McGrath, Education Programs Manager at the Duke Leamer Center in Durham, North Carolina. Thank you both so much for joining us today. It was so much fun.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And Kathleen, next week is our last matchup of the Charismatic Creature Carnival. Who are we going to hear about?
So next week is going to the birds. Our charismatic creatures up for discussion are the pigeon and the shoebill stork. And listeners can sign up to join our behind the scenes recording of this event on our website, sciencefriday.com/livestream.